episode of Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
This is one of the most monumental days in Idaho criminal justice history. We're just moments away from Bryan Kohberger. He is the man accused of one of the most heinous crimes in modern memory, which was the cold-blooded, calculated killing, stabbing deaths of 4 University of Idaho students. Well, he's expected to walk into the Ada County Courthouse in just about 28 minutes' time and is expected to plead guilty to these hideous charges. That is a live look at the Ada County Courthouse. Welcome, everybody, to STS Nation. This is the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime, and we're always all over big breaking news, which is what is happening today. Joining us right now, one of our new best guests, Colin McCallum. He is the host of the Is This Legal podcast. He is a criminal defense attorney out of Denver, Colorado. So not too far from Boise, and we are happy to have him. So Colin, before we even get cracking here, we're 27 minutes away. I saw my friend Kevin Fixler, who's the investigative reporter for the Idaho Statesman. He was tweeting out that security is so tight here today for this that they're airport style, not even allowing bottles of water in there. This is really a historic day. Last night, if you missed it, I would highly advise you guys going back. We had former Idaho State Supreme Court Justice Jim Jones, and Colin was with us for that. He's an amazing guy. But Colin, what are your thoughts heading into this in 26 minutes?
Man, I mean, this is the culmination of 2.5 years in the making, right? This has been an incredible case that has captivated the nation. Certainly, it has rocked this relatively small community where this took place. And I think equally, I think we were all dealing with the news that there was going to be a guilty plea in this case. I think we all dealt with that in our own different ways. That it was kind of shocking, though, to say the least. This case absolutely appeared like it was 100% on a trial track. Jury selection was about to start after several delays. And then all of a sudden, all of that stuff is done. We have a resolution. And Bryan Kohberger is apparently going to walk into court and say the words guilty 4 times in relation to his 4 murder victims. So it's an incredible day. It's a very sad day. And I think the hope here is that this day is going to at least begin the closure process for all of the victims and their families involved.
Yeah. One of the things I want to touch upon very early on, as in right now, there are obviously 4 victims' families here. You've got Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogan. The Goncalves family has been incredibly outspoken, Colin, very upset about this. They wanted to go to trial, and they wanted to see Bryan Kohberger ultimately put to death, which was no guarantee. They have made the decision, and this is relatively new news. This is Kaylee's family. Kaylee, top left there. So that her family has made the decision that they are not going to attend the hearing. They are going to be outside the courthouse protesting. They are really no other way to describe it other than furious, feeling betrayed, defiant. Here's a direct quote from Steve Goncalves to Fox News reporter, former court TV reporter Chanley Painter. He said, "I'll stay outside during the hearing to protest the deal made with our child's killer. It's cruel. We weren't given real input. This isn't justice. It's convenience." Colin, your react. I mean, there's just no way to put yourself in the parent's shoes here. 2 families seem like they're welcoming this plea deal, and the Kernodles and notably the Goncalves family very unhappy about it. What do you make of these comments from Steve Goncalves, Colin?
Well, Joel, they're heartbreaking, and I say that from the standpoint of clearly you have the prosecution that's decided to go in a different direction than what the Gonsalves family was wanting. The Gonsalves family was wanting a trial, and that is completely understandable. We talked about it yesterday with Justice Jones, and there are some cases that I think that the community should hear. There are some cases that rock a community so significantly that it almost that case belongs to be heard in the jurisdiction by jurors who live in this community, who can decide the guilt or innocence of Bryan Kohberger. And obviously that's not going to happen. And so certainly you can understand how a person like Steve Gonsalves feels robbed of what his notion of justice would be, which clearly, based on his comments, he wanted the death penalty to be sought. He wanted the death penalty to be imposed. He wanted Bryan Kohberger to die. And of course, we know those things aren't going to happen now. But of course, it all goes back to a very fundamental process in our justice system, which is the state. The prosecutor is the one that is bringing charges. And victims like Steve Gonsalves, they do have input. They do have say. It's clear that the district attorney's office did consult with them. Their opinion was important to them in making their final decision. They wanted to reach out to these folks and give them an opportunity. But there are a number of other competing interests that came into play here. It is no small thing that you have Bryan Kohberger, this person who I guess at this point I still say allegedly until he's entered the plea, but who allegedly killed 4 people, who's going to be pleading guilty to those things. You have this case, and this man is walking in and saying, I am okay with spending the rest of my life in prison. I am waiving my appeals. I will not challenge my verdict. I am just going to go away and live 40, 50, 60 years in prison at the expense of the state. That's going to ring hollow for the Gonsalves family. Clearly, they've made it clear. But maybe for the other families, they're looking at it differently. They're looking at this as a way, okay, we can get closure. We know that we're not have to be up at night wondering whether or not this guy's going to ever get out on appeal. Look, we've talked about it with multiple guests on your show. And we lawyers who actually see this, it's true. You never know what a jury is going to do. You think you do? I mean, I've been doing this for 22 years. I've done a number of jury trials. I can't tell you the number of times I've been surprised by a verdict, either from a case that I thought I was going to lose that I was going to win, or a case that I thought for sure I was going to win that I lost. And especially in a capital murder case, the stakes are high. You don't want to worry about that one juror who's going to do something bizarre or rogue. You got a guy who's going to plead guilty, go to jail for the rest of his life. That's a big victory in the eyes of the state, in the eyes of the prosecutor, in this particular jurisdiction.
Yeah. There's a question here from Gulf Coast Girl, and I'm just prepping here for the actual hearing, and it's amazing to have Colin on. He's so measured and smart and eloquent, so we appreciate it. But Gulf Coast Girl here, did we find out why? Did Bryan do this so his family won't have to testify? The short answer is we have no idea why. Do you think we're ever going to learn the motive? Do you think it's to spare his family? One thing they said about Ted Bundy, who apparently this guy tried to emulate, and I'm going to repeat this tonight, probably one of our most amazing shows coming up. We've got Dr. Catherine Ramsland, who taught Bryan Kohberger and is a well-known serial killer profiler. That's what she studies. She wrote a book about BTK with BTK. And we've got Dr. Ann Burgess. I mean, 2 of the biggest, if not the biggest, coming on tonight at 7, and I'll remind you of that. But what do you think, Colin? Do you think we're ever going to get the answer? Why?
I don't think we're going to get it today. That's for sure. I think your savvy listeners kind of know what's happening today. But to kind of recap what we think is going to happen, we have a change of plea today. That's what the hearing is for, where Bryan Kohberger is going to change his not guilty pleas to guilty pleas. And what that's going to require of him is he is going to have to acknowledge that he committed acts that meet the elements for the offense of murder, with respect to all 4 individuals, as well as all of the charges. But of course, we're focused on the 4 homicide charges. So he is going to, the way that it can be done, it can be done a couple of different ways. Sometimes the prosecutor will actually read the charge and evidence. Sometimes the judge will, but they'll specifically say to each charge, they'll ask him, how do you plead? Guilty or not guilty? Guilty. One thing they will not be doing is they're not going to be saying, okay, Mr. Kohberger, please spell out in detail how you carried out this offense. Please spell out in detail why you did what you did. What was the motivation behind what you did? He's not going to be required to say that today. This is going to be very streamlined, very simple. I'm expecting him to say very little. So of course, Joel, coming back to your question, are we ever going to know? My gut tells me that we will. I might, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a psychologist, but I think I just watching this case unfold from the beginning, I detect a certain amount of narcissism from Mr. Kohberger. You mentioned the fact that he was emulating other serial killers. People like this tend to want attention, and I could see him wanting to grant interviews. Maybe later, it could be with media outlets. It could be, who knows, maybe it'll be STS.
Yeah.
But I can see him wanting to not just simply go away quietly. I think that he's savvy enough to know that people have a great interest in this case, and he might try and take advantage of that and maybe make a statement. He could write a book. Now, of course, it's unclear whether or not he could profit on any of those things. Some laws actually have states that prevent a person from enriching themselves, pursuant to a crime that they committed. Who knows? But I don't think there may be something coming down, but it's not going to come from a legal proceeding. Certainly not going to come today. Those answers.
Look at this comment. When two worlds collide, Diddy is a perfect example why this plea is the ideal conclusion. I don't trust jurors. Been a lot of funky things happening with
absolutely.
It is, and to your point, I do think we're going to get the answer too, because not only do you have traditional media, you've got all this new media, and there was a ton of it today. Basically, people with cameras covering the Diddy case, and there's a thirst for understanding and getting answers, and now the process has really been democratized. So I think we will get answers. If you watch the last Dateline, they actually mentioned, I almost fell out of my seat, they mentioned STS and suggested that Bryan Kohberger was actually watching all these podcasts. So listen, he'd be a fascinating interview. I don't think there's a journalist alive that wouldn't want to speak to him. But what he did, what he's going to plead, and again, you have to say allegedly for about another 15 minutes. But after that, you won't have to use that word anymore. But what he did is, the worst of the worst of the worst. I mean, it's the stuff that horror movies are literally made of. My friend Kevin Fixler with the Idaho Statesman, he tweeted out a while back that you had to be there. It was a first come, first served basis. No media priority, nothing. The lines formed 5 hours, if not longer, before the hearing was set to start. He and another reporter for the Idaho Statesman are there. So you're going to expect an absolutely packed courtroom today, as anyone would expect. And we're going to bring it to you all live. This is being streamed from the Ada County Courthouse. So besides the Goncalves family being upset about this, the Kernodle family, that's Xana Kernodle's family, it's unclear, at least according to my latest reporting. And if anybody knows differently, please let us know. We're a family here at STS Nation. We work together. That's another great thing about this new media is I love to involve the community. But as far as we know, it's unclear whether or not they're going to attend. They're quiet, reflective, saying that they're feeling overwhelmed. They have not issued any public statements, so people just simply don't know if they're going to be there or not. Her older sister, Xana's older sister, whose name is Jasmine, spelled Jazzmin, Jasmine. She's occasionally spoken about the loss of her sister, but we, as far as I know, have not heard anything about them going into this. Now, Maddie Mogen's family, they are expected to attend. They say that they're not planning to speak publicly at all. They've been very private, steady, seeking closure throughout this. Her stepfather, a gentleman named Scott Laramie, previously said, and I'll quote this, we've said from the beginning, whatever brings us peace, whatever ends this, we will support. They have just maintained a very dignified sort of quietness, and they say that they're only planning to speak now through their attorney, a guy named Leander James. So that's the Mogen family. And then the Chapin family, whose mom wrote a book, a children's book. I think it's The Boy in Blue, which would support the family. And I think she's donating all the money, actually. He is a triplet. So now two of them must go on without their third. He has a brother and a sister, again, who are triplets. They say that they will be in Boise for the hearing. Somber but supportive of the resolution. The quote, the statement from the family spokesperson, who's a woman named Christina Teves. The quote is, "This will bring an end to a nightmare. We support the decision and are grateful. This will prevent years of painful appeals. They've consistently asked for peace and privacy, focusing on preserving Ethan's memory." And I got the chills. I don't want to sound corny, but reading that, I just got the chills, Colin. It's hard to underscore this or overstate it, but they say this is going to bring the end to a nightmare. We all read about this. We all see the headlines, and, you know, it can even be exciting. And it's this guy's going to court. These people lost their daughter in the most horrific, cruel, literally just unimaginable way. And maybe this trial, it would not have been unimaginable for them anymore. They would have gotten details that maybe no parent should have to listen to. I'm not suggesting that the Goncalveses are wrong in any way or that there shouldn't have been a trial, because it's up to them. But do you think we would have heard testimony during the course of this trial that would have just been the sort of thing that you can never forget?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's one reason that you're kind of seeing a split in opinions from these victims in terms of what they wanted to see happen, what will bring them peace. You know, using that word peace for just a second. I, again, can't imagine being in that situation. I am a parent, and you know, when you hear of cases like this, I do try and wonder myself, how would I react? What I can tell you, though, is having actually, you know, been a prosecutor in some really just grisly, bloody trials where there's violence involved, it really is horrible to have to, you know, look at autopsy photos, to look at crime scene photos, to hear in detail from a medical examiner how your loved one spent their last moments. And in this case, of course, as we know, the manner of death was particularly heinous and hideous. And I you have, in order to prove that someone committed murder, you have to, as a prosecutor, go into all of that evidence. You have to go into great detail to show how a person died, why they died, and why a person like Mr. Kohberger was responsible for that crime. And the testimony in these areas are just excruciating. You know, I have seen cases that were so bad where, you know, like the paralegals who worked on the case for the prosecution, preparing them for trial, they needed to undergo counseling afterward, just due to the trauma that was inflicted of just looking at you know, these horrible photographs and hearing about this evidence. So I mean, obviously, like I've said from the beginning, the Goncalves family feels very, very strongly that this should have been a death penalty case. You know, I learned from your reporting this morning that They're apparently outside the courthouse and aren't even going to go in. And, I just think that's heartbreaking. I can tell you, I also saw they have a Facebook page. And as of yesterday evening, it seemed like they were asking the federal government to get involved with this case. It was a little unclear, but they put up a link to the Department of Justice website demanding action. I was unclear if they were, asking the feds to specifically intervene in this case and begin a prosecution that might result in the death penalty, or if they were simply asking people to, petition the government to make sure that surprise pleas like this don't happen. But that's how worked up this family is. And of course, you contrast that with how the Mogan family is feeling. They're much more subdued. They're much more somber. They're not getting in front of the media. And believe me when I say, I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong way to handle this. These folks are entitled, frankly, to handle this situation in a manner that gives them peace and hope for the future. But again, these conflicts, Joel, this is exactly why I think a prosecutor might be making this decision. They're saying, look, we have different people who want different things. What can we do? What can we do to guarantee the safety of our community? Well, they're willing to say, we're willing to lock this guy up. We're willing to not kill him, but at least he's never going to see the light of day from a jail cell again.
Yeah, we are 7 minutes away from what will be a historic plea hearing. Bryan Kohberger, the accused killer of the 4 University of Idaho students, he is set to admit the 4 counts of murder, to say guilty, 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 guilty. He's not really compelled to give much more. You're looking at the live feed from the courthouse. COE and Space Coast, so I don't have a heart attack. Let's leave this up here, and if need be, we'll if you need to reset it or whatever you need to do there, Spacey, you do what you got to do. But I like to have it up there. It's kind of like my pacifier, seeing that it is up there. So, Colin, let's go through the actual hearing, which again is going to start now in 6 minutes. And Judge Stephen Hippler has been right on time. Again, a large crowd is going to be expected, probably standing room only if such a thing exists inside this courthouse. It will happen today. I don't know if they have overflow rooms, but I assume that they will. This is what is known as a change of plea hearing, a standard procedure once a defendant accepts a plea agreement. Bryan Kohberger is expected to plead guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of felony burglary, and it's in connection, obviously, with the November 13th, 2022 killing of Kaylee Goncalves, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. We can't say those names enough today. We should be saying those and not the killer's name. And this plea now replaces the originally scheduled August 2025 trial. So, Colin, this is fairly routine, is it not, for you attorneys? Walk us through. This is not going to be, it's going to be typical in the way it's carried out, but obviously atypical in its stature. But walk us through sort of a typical change of plea hearing.
Yeah, it is fairly routine. And yet I think with this particular case, I'm expecting, frankly, the parties to take a little bit more time than normal because of the purpose of the plea. One of the purposes of the big things that we're doing today is we are ensuring that Bryan Kohberger is making a knowing and voluntary plea. That's really important. Okay, the judge, I'm expecting the judge to address Mr. Kohberger and to make sure that he states in open court that he's had enough time to make this decision, that this is in fact how he wants to proceed. There will most likely already have been completed plea paperwork that enumerates all of the rights that Bryan Kohberger and frankly any defendant has in a criminal case and lets them know that they're waiving that right. So I would have expected his attorneys to have gone over some paperwork and basically already signed a guilty plea, that those documents then get turned into the court, and then the court reviews them on the record at this hearing to make sure that, Bryan Kohberger did indeed sign these documents, that he does in fact want to enter these pleas, and that he's doing so knowingly and voluntarily. I do expect there to be a fair amount of questioning, or I guess dialogue with Mr. Kohberger with regard to, just making sure that he is aware of what he's doing today, that he's aware that he's waiving all of his constitutional rights. He waives his right to a jury trial, and he can never get that back. The judge is going to be making sure that he is familiar with these concepts, and undoubtedly he will be. But I also expect, again, we're not going to hear a lot from Kohberger. I'm going to expect to hear kind of a lot of yes, Your Honor, no, Your Honor. Yes, this is how I want to proceed. And eventually, like I said, he will have to say guilty. He will have to say, I'm guilty to each of the charges that he's pleading guilty to. But that's pretty much it. And then the judge will accept the plea. And what I am expecting is that sentencing is going to be set out for another date. So I don't believe we're actually going to sentencing today. So the time for the victims to address the court and talk about, and frankly address directly Mr. Kohberger, that's going to come on a different day. On that date, Mr. Kohberger will also have an opportunity to address the court. Now, if he wanted to at that hearing, this upcoming sentencing hearing, he could talk about what happened. He could apologize. He could take responsibility. But he doesn't have to say a word if he doesn't want to. From what we can see, from what we know, there's no requirement that he allocute. That's a fancy legal word for saying, him getting in front of a judge and spelling out to the court what exactly he did and why he did it. I don't think we're ever going to see that. But really today is going to be very kind of narrow and streamlined. Are you pleading guilty? Do you know what that means? And are you willing to waive all of your other constitutional rights by pleading guilty?
Yeah. By the way, inside the mind of Joel Waldman, your host, I'm now worried that this entire thing is going to crash because the world is all trying to get this feed simultaneously. But this is supposed to start in 2 minutes' time. Quick shout out to Nikki Cuds. It's her birthday today. I don't even know if she's in here, but happy birthday, Nikki. Question for Colin. Will the court files be, great question, is anything going to be unsealed after this is all over for the public to see?
That is a great question. That usually lies with the prosecution. The prosecution may decide to release some evidence, but there's really no need to, other than to kind of satisfy public curiosity. And I don't know if that'll ever be fully satisfied in this case. And there's also a lot of things that I can just about guarantee would never be released. Autopsy photos, crime scene photos, things like that are generally kept from public view. So I would not expect a release of information right away. Now, once the case is done, people from the prosecution team, people from the investigation team, they can be interviewed about this, whether by media or other folks. They can talk about this case and what they had and what they didn't have. I don't know if we'll see that. I don't know if I'm going to see a line of people who dealt with this case who are going to be lining up to talk to people about what they found. But that's one avenue we might get from the investigators, since obviously if there's a guilty plea, people are free to talk about it. There's not going to be a gag order anymore, and we'll see. We might get information that way. I would say, though, don't hold your breath.
I believe we have a statement. I believe this is it from the Kohbergers now. And this COE, yours didn't come through, but I have it here. This is now from the attorney for Bryan Kohberger, a guy named Jason Labar. He says, first and foremost, no, this is not it. This is the old one. COE, see if you can resend that to me. Here we go. This is a statement from a law firm called Amori and Associates. I don't have the state, but here we go. In light of recent developments, the Kohbergers are asking members of the media for privacy, respect, and responsible judgment during this time. We will continue to allow the legal process to unfold with respect to all parties and will not release any comments or take any questions. We ask that you respect our wishes during a difficult time for all those affected. Now, this is not a popular take here, Colin, and some people are suspicious of the father, but at least the sister, the mother, these aren't the people who committed these crimes. They are dragged into this. They are victims in their own right, even though that is not a popular take, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you just said, and what a horrible position to be in. You know, I know that the investigation early on did involve Bryan Kohberger's father. You know, he was eventually staying there after the homicides, and he was I think on the road with his father when he was contacted by the police who were investigating him. At the same time, though, I feel for this entire family. I'm sure that they've been, bombarded with media and just people wanting to talk to them and find out if they can get any answers. And I can't imagine what life has been like for them for the last 2.5 years. Like you mentioned, they had nothing to do with this particular crime. They were thousands of miles away when Mr. Kohberger allegedly for 5 more minutes did what he did.
Yeah.
And I can't I'm the defense attorney. I can't,
Yeah.
I can't,
Oh, I'm the
not use it,
reporter. Yeah, I
you
got
know.
you.
So, I feel for the Kohberger family. Some people probably have no sympathy for them whatsoever, and I get that too. But they didn't ask for this. They didn't want this. And they're losing their son in this. I mean, I guess there's debates in terms of what that loss is like compared to the 4 murdered victims. And I'm not attempting to compare those, but certainly the Kohberger family is going through their own losses here, and just an example of why this case has no winners.
100%. We are at 1:03, so we are 3 minutes past top of the hour. I'm texting the COE. Do we need to refresh? What do we need to do? The entire world is taking this feed today. You're going to get the best coverage here at STS, assuming that the feed works. So we're at the behest of the court here, and this hearing is supposed to start any moment. I just saw a flicker, and I can feel it in my chest. From Julia Gonzalez, hi, sir. To you, Colin. Can the judge, thank you for the super chat, and we have so many people in here. The super chats will definitely get noticed, but can the judge deny the plea and continue the hearing? I mean, from the Philippines, thank you, Philippines, for joining us. Love the Philippines and the Filipino people. So, Colin, the chance is extremely remote, I imagine, but the judge, does he have that discretion?
Yeah, that's a great question from your listener, all the way from the Philippines too. That's something. So it's a fantastic question, because yes, the judge does actually have some power here. The judge is in a lot of ways kind of like a referee, right? A judge is going to allow the parties to play ball, but if the judge feels like something has been just fundamentally unfair, or then he can step in and he can do something about it. So yes, a judge does actually have the power to say, I'm rejecting this plea agreement. I think this case should go to trial, and I'm not going to accept anything less than a death sentence. He does have that power, but I am not expecting the judge to exercise that authority for such a monumental outcome where so many people were probably consulted. I think that this judge, as we're all expecting, is just going to leave the parties to their own devices. He's going to say, okay, you folks know this case. You guys are the parties to this case. You guys have been gearing up for a trial for the last 2.5 years. I'm going to let you decide what you feel is appropriate. And unless this is just, arbitrary and capricious, or and I know some people feel that way, but I'm talking really from an objective legal standard. I'm expecting the judge to allow this plea to go forward today.
Yeah. The COE is reassuring me that it's just being held up because of the magnitude of this hearing. It was supposed to start 6 minutes ago. I know that Space Coast and the COE are checking and refreshing and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as soon as it starts, you're going to get it live. This is the plea hearing for Bryan Kohberger and the murder of the 4 University of Idaho students who had not yet even come close to entering the prime. I don't think I've entered the prime of my life, and I've got a few years, like maybe 3.5, 4 decades on them. Boston Sarah, Is there any opportunity for a claim years down the line, Colin, that he was coerced or unable to make this decision due to his autism? Or is this, like you said, once he reveals that guilty uh, proclamation or allocution 4 times, then it is set in stone?
Yeah. You're getting great questions from your
Yeah.
listeners. Boston Sarah, that's another awesome question. That's a sharp one. So yes, and that's why today is going to be an important day. It's generally kind of a two-prong process with these plea deals, meaning there's a written agreement, and then everything kind of gets restated at the actual court hearing, i.e., today, where a judge can specifically ask about these things. I would expect there to be language in the plea agreement that specifically states, I, Bryan Kohberger, understand that I am waiving any sort of what we call collateral attack on the plea agreement, meaning he can't later come forward and say, hey, you know what? My lawyers just totally beat me up and told me to take this plea deal. He can't say, you know what, this was a function of my autism. My lawyers took advantage of me and told me to plead guilty. This was involuntary. That's what today's hearing is supposed to vet out. That's exactly what today's hearing is going to ensure against. They're going to make sure they say, look, Mr. Kohberger, you do not have to enter this plea. You understand, right, that you have a constitutional right under the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution to take your case to a jury trial and have a jury of your peers decide your guilt or innocence. Same thing with the penalty phase. That has to be done later if you are convicted. And he will have to say, yes, I am aware of those rights. I'm aware that by entering my plea of guilty today, I am waiving those rights now and forever. So it's a fantastic question from Boston Sarah. And frankly, 10, 15 years ago, I'm absolutely expecting him to come forward and say, you know what, I think I want to take a shot at my plea. I think I want to attack my plea and see if I can get out of here. And he might file something just like that. He could attack his own lawyers. That's something that we often see, right? We're the first targets in this thing, folks.
Yeah.
They're going to say, hey, my lawyer told me to do this. I didn't want to do it, but he made me do it, and I felt coerced, and I want to unwind this thing. So again, the judge is going to ask questions like, look, have you been coerced? Has anybody forced you to do this? Has anybody told you to do this against your will? And he's going to have to say, no, I'm doing this voluntarily, or answer questions to that effect. That's generally what happens in these hearings. Great question.
SC girl. He's taking a plea because he knows we want a trial, period. There are people out there who say, well, look, he's controlling. He's the puppet master. He's controlling this even from behind bars. And since people want to know, he's now saying, I think maybe the bigger reason is that he's a total coward. And like his hero, Ted Bundy, he's terrified of death. So, again, we're waiting for this plea hearing to start. There are some things I just want to go through. So the death penalty, the terms of this plea agreement, the death penalty obviously is the biggest. That will be removed in exchange for his plea. The prosecution will no longer seek the death penalty. The sentencing terms, it's going to be 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, and then an additional 10 years for burglary, and he's got to waive his appeal rights. So that's the Boston Sarah's question or point, but he's got to waive his appeal rights, and the state can seek restitution on behalf of the victims' families. Let's break this down. So, Colin, 4 life sentences, is that consecutive or concurrent? I assume it's going to be consecutive.
I would expect consecutive sentencing as well. That's just typically what's done. In a way, it's kind of academic, because if they're concurrent, but they're a life sentence anyway, you get to the same place, I suppose. But I feel like consecutive sentencing, and I guess just to make sure all of your viewers know what I'm talking about, consecutive sentences can stack. Okay, so if he gets 4 consecutive life sentences, essentially those are 4 separate sentences on top of each other, versus concurrent sentencing, where all of the sentences are basically served under one sentence, albeit life in prison. I feel like they're going to be consecutive. I think that just generally, I think I think that feels more appropriate for a case like this. It's symbolic in that it would require Kohberger to take responsibility for each killing, and I think it's a way of making sure that we that we keep all of these individual victims, I guess, separate, and we remind ourselves that there were 4 people here, with 4 families, with 4 worlds of people who love them all. And it's a way where we can say we're acknowledging that this person is going to get a sentence for each and every one of these victims. So I think it's going to be consecutive.
There you go. And that is just, a mind-boggling amount of time. Either way, he's never seen the light of day again,
Yeah.
and will be toe tagged is how he will be paroled out of that prison, whatever state prison he's in. He'll only come out in a pine box, which for these crimes is exactly, in my opinion, how it should go. The 10 years for burglary. Can you speak to that, Colin? People are still walking into the courtroom. The COE is trying to calm my nerves. This was supposed to start at 1:13. At 1 o'clock. It is now 1:13. But the burglary charge, some people have questions on that. Colin, can you explain it away?
Sure. First of all, this is par for the course for me. Court never starts on time. Again, having done this for almost over 2 decades, if I could calculate the amount of time I've spent waiting for court to start, sitting in a pew, I'd be curious about how many years that is, because I do a lot of waiting around. So this is kind of what I'm used to. I'm sure we'll get started soon. With regard to the burglary count, I was curious about that myself. It just maybe is it's kind of an acknowledgement by the district attorney that they want Kohberger to take responsibility for everything that he did. In addition to murder, he obviously did break into this house. That's what burglary is, when you essentially unlawfully enter or remain into someone's dwelling. That's with the intent to commit a crime there, and that's burglary. I think it's just, look, we're kind of getting what we want.
All right. Sorry to interrupt, Colin. The moment of truth has arrived. The Honorable Judge Stephen Hippler here for a historic plea hearing. Bryan Kohberger versus the state of Idaho and the murder of the 4 University of Idaho students. Let's watch together.
All right, this is CR 0124316665. Defendant is present in custody with counsel, Ms. Thompson, Ms. Jennings, and Ms. Taylor, Ms. Massoff, and Ms. Barlow. The state's present with Mr. Thompson, Mr. Horowitz, Ms. Jennings, and Mr. Nye is here as well. Am I miss anybody? I'm sorry.
Ms. Allen is here as well.
Ms. Allen is here as well. Very well, thank you. All right, we are here today to entertain a change of plea. Before I start, I want to address some issues of concern and otherwise. First, I appreciate everybody in attendance today being on their best behavior. Please, no outbursts or demonstrations. Any such conduct will result in immediate removal and may result in an inability to attend further court proceedings in this case. I want to point out that there have been calls by some for the public to contact me and my office in an attempt to influence my decision-making in this case. This has been extraordinarily disruptive for court staff and the ability for them to get work done, not only in this case, but in other cases where defendants are entitled to have their cases processed, and frankly, as important, if not more so, for victims to have their cases processed in those cases. It's also highly inappropriate. A court is not supposed to, and this court will never take into account public sentiment in making an opinion regarding its judicial decisions in cases. Courts should, and I always will, make decisions based on where the facts and the law lead me, period. I have not read any of the numerous messages nor listened to any of the numerous voicemails that have been sent to me and my staff. Those have all been forwarded to security and, where appropriate, to law enforcement. I ask that you not continue to mount such campaigns or to send me information like this, because again, it is not appropriate and frankly not something I would take into account when deciding a matter in a case like this. I also want people to understand some very basic concepts about the ideas of separation of powers, what the court's duties are, and what the duties and the rights of the executive, or in this case, the prosecuting attorney, is. The executive, the elected prosecutor, is the sole authority in deciding what charges to pursue, including whether, as well as what penalties to ask for, and what penalties to pursue, including the death penalty. This court cannot require the prosecutor to seek the death penalty, nor would it be appropriate for this court to attempt to do that. This court, in considering a plea agreement, if it were to reject this plea agreement, cannot force the state to seek the death penalty. My role and power in considering a plea agreement is extremely limited. My role is to ensure that the defendant's plea is given freely, voluntarily, and intelligently. If those things are met, I can only reject a plea, such as the one in this case, where I'm not being asked to agree to the sentence in advance. I can only reject it, for example, if the defendant does not meet or admit to all of the elements of the crime. That is, I can ensure what is called a factual basis to the plea. Finally, I want to offer my apologies to all the families, including the victims' families, the families of the defendant, for the short notice for today's hearing, and I'm sure what must have been the hurried efforts to get here. I, like most everyone else, learned of this plea agreement Monday afternoon and had no inkling of it beforehand. Prior to that time, I was under the belief that this case was proceeding to trial, as had been indicated, and my staff and I were busy continuing to work on preparations to have potentially 10,000 citizens of Ada County come to jury duty starting in mid-July, with the questionnaire process in mid-July. It was, once I learned of the defendant's decision to change his plea in this case, it was important that I take the plea as soon as possible because of the extraordinary administrative efforts that were otherwise attendant to the process of this, getting this trial potentially underway on time, and including the significant process of bringing, again, potentially up to 10,000 jurors to come in and fill out juror questionnaires prior to the beginning of the voir dire process. And so it was important that we, if we're going to go down this road, do so expeditiously so that we can avoid those costs and expenses associated with that. Otherwise, if it was not going to result in a plea, or if for some reason the plea were to fall through today, that we could continue diligently towards trial at the time specified. And so that obviously required that we act quickly. And so some folks may have not had the amount of time that we would otherwise allow for them to travel here. And so, again, I apologize for that. I want to make people aware that during the hearing, if you are to leave the courtroom for any reason, you will not be readmitted during the hearing. Also, when we finish the hearing this morning, I ask that the public and media wait in their seats until the victims' families and the defendants' families and others are escorted out of the courtroom before you start to leave. Finally, I want to acknowledge the trial court administrator and her staff, the Ada County Sheriff, and the Ada County 4th District Marshal Service for the huge lift that they've accomplished in preparing for and orchestrating this hearing today, as well as to all the security attendant today that you see, and some of whom many of whom you don't see, with less than 48 hours notice. And so I appreciate the hard work that they've been doing. Frankly, some of them while they were on some vacation prior to the trial starting and had to call that short. And so I appreciate very much their professionalism and dedication. All right. That said, let's move to the business of today. I understand the state and the defense have reached a plea agreement in this case. For the record, I have a written plea agreement which indicates in sum, the defendant will plead guilty to all 5 counts in the indictment, burglary, felony, and first-degree murder, 4 counts. The state and the defendant stipulate, that is, that the defense is not free to argue for a lesser sentence at sentencing to the following. The defendant on the burglary charge will be sentenced to 10 years fixed, and that the defendant on counts 2 through 5, the 4 counts of first-degree homicide, on each count would receive a fixed life sentence, all 5 of those counts to run consecutive to one another. Defendant, as part of the plea agreement, waives his right to appeal, as well as his right to appeal the sentence and his right to seek leniency or reconsideration of the sentence under Idaho Criminal Rule 35. This is not a Rule 11 agreement, meaning the court is not bound by the plea agreement and could impose a different lawful sentence at sentencing. The stipulated agreement between the parties is the maximum on each count. So theoretically, the only thing the court could do would be a lesser sentence at sentencing. But the defendant is not free to ask the court to do so under the plea agreement. Are there any other material terms of the plea agreement that the parties would like to make? Obviously, the plea agreement, the written plea agreement will speak for itself and be part of the court record.
Not from the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, very well. All right. Ms. Taylor, have you had sufficient time to discuss this case and all of its ramifications with your client?
I have, Your Honor.
Have you discussed fully with him his rights, defenses, and possible consequences to him of the guilty plea?
Yes, Your Honor.
Have you been able to do all the discovery you feel necessary?
Yes, Your Honor.
And have you informed your client of the importance of providing the court truthful and accurate answers in taking this plea today?
I have.
Have you apprised your client of any and all offers and counter offers and answered his questions about those?
Yes,
Do you consent to the entry of the plea today?
I do.
All right, Mr. Kohberger, I need to ask you some questions this afternoon, or I guess it's this morning still. I do this to ensure that so that I am assured that you understand the nature of the charges to which I understand you're going to plead guilty, as well as the possible consequences to you of your guilty pleas. I want to make sure your plea is given voluntarily, and I want to make sure that you actually committed the crimes to which you're pleading guilty, because I don't want you to plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit. If you attempt to plead guilty today, but for some reason I don't accept your plea, then it is possible that your statements today could be used against you later at trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And now while you're standing, actually, why don't you take the oath from the clerk?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in the matter not being before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, and Mr. Kohberger, just to make it easier, you don't need to stand when you speak to me. I appreciate the sign of respect, but for convenience, you can remain seated, all right? Before I start asking you questions today, have you consumed substantive questions? Let me ask you, have you consumed any alcohol, drug, or other intoxicating substance that would impair your ability to understand or exercise reasonable judgment?
No.
You feel like you are thinking clearly today?
Yes.
All right, I want you to understand what the possible penalties are for each of the crimes to which I understand you're going to offer a guilty plea today. They include on count one, the burglary, a fine of up to $50,000 and a period of incarceration of up to 10 years in the state penitentiary. You may be required to pay restitution to any victims of the crime. Count 2, 3, 4, and 5 for first-degree murder. The consequences include a fine of up to $50,000, a period of incarceration of life imprisonment, which is a requirement of a sentence, that it be a life sentence with a mandatory minimum sentence of at least 10 years on each of those counts. In addition, you would be potentially responsible for a fine of up to $5,000 to each of the victims of your crime to be enforced in the form of a civil judgment to operate as additional punishment. This is in excess of any restitution or fines that the court could order. And again, you may be required to pay restitution to the victims of the crime. You would be required to provide, as to counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, a DNA sample and a right thumbprint impression, and potentially pay for analysis of those samples. You would lose any right to possess, purchase, or carry a firearm, the right to serve on jury duty, the right to hold public office, and the right to vote. Do you understand the charges and all those possible consequences?
Yes.
You've heard the plea agreement that I talked about today. Do you agree with that plea agreement?
Yes.
And do you understand the nature of the charges that you've been charged with that I understand you're going to plead guilty today to?
Yes.
As as I indicated, I'm not bound by the plea agreement, but the plea agreement is for the maximum on each count. Do you understand that I'm not bound by the plea agreement?
Yes.
Has anyone promised you that I would be lenient or easy on you if you pled guilty?
No.
Has anyone threatened you or anyone close to you to get you to plead guilty?
No.
Is anyone other than the state's agreements with respect to the plea agreement, has anyone promised you anything in exchange for your plea agreement?
No.
Has anyone told you to be untruthful in answering my questions today?
No.
Has anyone offered you a reward of any kind other than the plea agreement in order to get you to plead guilty today?
No.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
And counsel, obviously there have been a number of motions filed to suppress evidence in this case. Other than those filed, are there any other motions that you felt were available with respect to Rule 12?
No, Your Honor.
And Mr. Kohberger, you understand that by entering the guilty plea in this case, you would be giving up your right to appeal any decision this court made, as well as your sentence.
Yes.
Have you had enough time to decide whether or not to plead guilty?
Yes.
Are you pleading guilty freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
Given your choices, do you believe it's in your best interest to plead guilty?
Yes.
Have you discussed fully the matter of pleading guilty with your attorney, and are you satisfied with the advice you've received?
Yes.
Has your attorney advised you to your satisfaction about what your rights are, what your defenses may be, and what the possible consequences to you of your guilty plea are?
Yes.
Has your attorney done everything you've asked them to do?
Yes.
Are you satisfied with their representation of you?
Yes.
I have received a written guilty plea advisory questionnaire that is purported to be filled out by you. Did you fill that document out?
Yes.
Did you understand the questions that you answered in this document?
Yes.
And are the answers that are outlined in this document your answers?
Yes.
Are those answers truthful?
Yes.
Did you sign the document?
Yes.
And this document outlines many of the rights that you have in this case. Should you not plead guilty, did you understand those rights?
Yes.
They include a right to a jury trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They include a right to the presumption of innocence. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You have the right to require the state to prove your guilt as to each element beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you understand that?
Yes.
They include a right to confront your accusers and cross-examine witnesses presented by the state, including by utilizing the subpoena power of the court to accomplish that. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You understand you would have a privilege against self-incrimination and a right to remain silent, meaning you would not be compelled to testify if you did not wish to, had you not pled guilty.
Yes.
You understand you're giving up that privilege and those rights that I've just outlined by pleading guilty.
Yes.
All right, I want you to understand what the state would have had to have proven at trial had you, to the crimes that you're pleading guilty to, had you, if you didn't plead guilty. Let me find the document. Hang on a second here. All right. So as to count one burglary, the state would have to have proven that on or about November 13, 2022 in Latah County, Idaho, you unlawfully entered a residence located at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder. As to count two, the state would have had to have proven that on or about that same date in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being, by stabbing Madison Mogan, from which she died. As to count three, the state would have had to have proven that on that same date in Latah County, at that same address, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Kaylee Goncalves, a human being, by stabbing her, from which she died. As to count four, the state would have had to have proven that on or about that same date in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being, by stabbing her, from which she died. And then as to count five, also murder in the first degree, that on or about November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, Idaho, you did willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought, kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being, by stabbing him, from which he died. Do you understand those things the state would have had to have proven?
Yes.
And do you understand that by pleading guilty, the state no longer has to prove those things because you're admitting those things are true?
Yes.
I want to also make, for the record, the defendant has provided with the guilty plea advisory form a document entitled Written Factual Basis that purports to have the defendant's signature dated 1 July 2025. Did you sign that document?
Yes.
And did you agree with the written factual basis that is included there?
Yes.
And then let me ask you, did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Goncalves, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
I would ask the state at this time to provide its recitation of its factual basis had this case gone to trial.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the organization of the recitation is different than what I think the court and the public may be familiar with from the probable cause affidavit and other documents. The state's evidence, as an overview, would show that back in March of 2022, when the defendant was residing in his parents' residence or was residing back in Pennsylvania, his home state, he purchased online a K-bar knife and sheath with an Amazon gift card that he had purchased shortly prior to the purchase of the knife, sheath, and sharpener. Jumping ahead, the end of June of that year, the defendant, Mr. Kohberger, moved from Pennsylvania to Pullman, Washington, which is right across the state line from Moscow, Idaho, for the purpose of pursuing a PhD in criminal justice at Washington State University. The state's evidence would indicate that beginning July 9th of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone began connecting to a cell tower that serves the area of the 1122 King Road residence in Moscow, Idaho. Now, I will acknowledge for the court and all present that there are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants. Between July 9th of 2022 and November 7th, the defendant's phone connected to that particular tower during late night, early morning hours, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. on approximately 23 times. Now, I will acknowledge also, we do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122, but we can put his phone in that area on those times. In the interim, on August 22nd of 2022, Latah County Sheriff's Deputy Darren Duke conducted a traffic stop in the early morning hour or late evening hours, about 11 p.m. On the west side of Moscow, on the Moscow-Pullman Road. This was a traffic stop of Mr. Kohberger's car, which turned out to be a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra with Pennsylvania plates. During the course of the traffic stop, Deputy Duke was able to obtain Mr. Kohberger's name, Bryan Kohberger, his phone number, and his address, which at that point was an apartment address in Pullman. We then move to the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. The state's evidence would show that early morning hours on that day, Mr. Kohberger's phone left his Pullman residence, which is an apartment in kind of the central northwest part of Pullman. That phone was then subsequently turned off at approximately 2:54 a.m. and remained off until approximately 4:48 a.m. on Sunday, the 13th of November. The state's evidence would include a trial, video surveillance of a business on the Moscow-Pullman Highway, just across the state line from Moscow. It would show a vehicle matching the description of the defendant's Hyundai Elantra entering Moscow at approximately 3:02 a.m. Compiled surveillance that the investigators put together from businesses and residents then show the defendant's car, the white Elantra, as I've described, circling the 1122 King Road area, that neighborhood, starting around 3:30 or so in the morning. Comes into the immediate area of 1122 King Road, which is actually on a dead end, and then leaves several times. And approximately 4:05 that morning, the defense car had entered that area, was leaving, stopped at the intersection of King and Queen Road, did a U-turn, and the state's evidence would show that the defendant's car came back and parked behind and above the 1122 King Road residence. The state believes that its evidence would then show that the defendant entered the residence of 1122 through the kitchen sliding door on the back side of the residence, which is the side of the residence that would face the area above where the defendant's car was parked. Defendant entered the residence, went to the 3rd floor, and with a knife, killed Madison Mogan and Caitlin Gonzalez. The defendant, as he left that room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, or the sheath for a K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogan's body. And I can jump ahead. That sheath was tested by the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab, and single source male DNA was found on the snap of that sheath, as well as blood from both Kaylee and Madison and other trace evidence. But it's important to note single source male DNA was on the snap of that sheath. The state's evidence would show that Xana Kernodle was still awake at this time. In fact, had taken a DoorDash order not long before this started. Her room was not on the 3rd floor. It was on the 2nd floor on the west side. As the defendant was either coming down the stairs or leaving, he encountered Xana, and he ended up killing her, also with a large knife. Ethan Chapin, Xana's boyfriend, was asleep in their bedroom, in her bedroom, and the defendant killed him as well with a large fixed blade knife. Each victim suffered multiple wounds. I will state for the record that there is no evidence there was any sexual component or sexual assault on any of the victims. I want to make that clear so there's no speculation. There were 2 other roommates in the house, and they were already asleep. During the course of this, one of those roommates awoke, looked out her door not knowing what was going on, and saw the defendant, who was dressed in black with a black balaclava on, holding some sort of container in his hand. And she saw him leave the house through the direction of the kitchen where that sliding door is that I mentioned before. At approximately 4:20 that morning, so this would have been 15 minutes or so later, the defendant's car is seen on a surveillance camera for 1112 King Road, which is immediately next door to the west of 1122, leaving the area at a high rate of speed. And if the court were to see that, or anybody in this courtroom would see that, you can see the car almost loses control as it makes the corner, heads north, and then turns to go south on Walinta, which is one of the only ways to get out of that part of town. The evidence would show that following that, the defendant in his Elantra drove south of Moscow. We know that he drove on the back roads because there are surveillance cameras on the main highways, Highway 95, that would have picked up the defendant's car if he'd gone that route. And they did not show the defendant's car on that route during the time. So we know that he went through a variety of back roads in very rural, isolated part of Latah County About 4:48 that morning, defendant's phone comes back on. And the evidence will show that that phone was located south of Moscow, likely at a side road intersection with Highway 95. From there, the defendant's phone activity tracks it heading back north towards Pullman, Washington, where the defendant lived. About 5:26, starting approximately 5:26, various surveillance cameras in Pullman, Washington pick up the defendant's vehicle as he enters Pullman from the south and heads north and slightly west towards his apartment, where he arrived at approximately 5:30 in the morning. Later that morning, this Sunday, the 13th of November of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone returned to the area of King Road. We don't know exactly what he did, but it returned to that area. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. He was there for about 10 minutes and then returned to his Pullman residence. About 9:30, the state's evidence will show, evidence taken from the defendant's phone, that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up. The defendant's phone then went to the Lewiston-Clarkston Valley, approximately 30 miles south of Moscow and Pullman. And the defendant is actually seen with his car at various businesses down there. This area is the confluence of the Clearwater River and the Snake River. Lewiston is Idaho's seaport. Large bodies of moving water down there. In addition to tracing the defendant's activities, as I've just outlined, on the 13th and leading up to the 13th, the state's evidence will show that following Sunday, November 13th, 2022, business records show that the defendant began searching for a K-bar knife and a K-bar knife sheath, as the state believes, to replace the one that was left at the scene of the murders. The evidence also will suggest that there were at least attempts by the defendant to delete or alter his purchase history on Amazon, where all these transactions had occurred. Later that week, the state's evidence will show that Mr. Kohberger went to what we would call DMV, motor vehicle licensing here in Idaho, in Pullman, to change his car registration from Pennsylvania to Washington. That's of note because Pennsylvania cars do not require a front license plate. The vehicles seen on the surveillance cameras of the defendant's car showed it didn't have a front license plate on it. At the time of the traffic stop by Deputy Duke in August, it was Pennsylvania plate, no front license plate. Mr. Kohberger proceeded to finish his semester of studies at Washington State University and returned to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Law enforcement at this point were aware of Mr. Kohberger, had been accessing information about him, were trying to find him. They located him in Pennsylvania, and they conducted what's called a trash pull. During the nighttime hours, agents of the FBI, who assisted immensely with this case, working with the sanitation department back in this neighborhood in Pennsylvania, took trash that had been set out on the street for collection, sent the contents of that from the Pennsylvania residence of the defendant's parents to the Idaho State Forensic Laboratory, where the lab experts there were able to identify DNA on a Q-tip as coming from the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath that was next to Madison Logan's body in the bed. Subsequently, an arrest warrant was issued here in Idaho, and a search warrant was issued in the state of Pennsylvania with the assistance not only of the FBI, but the Pennsylvania State Police. Mr. Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home to return to Idaho. Upon his return to Idaho, a DNA sample was taken from him, and it matched the DNA found on the knife sheath next to Maddie's body at the crime scene. I can tell the court, in public, the weapon itself, the knife, has not yet been recovered. I can tell the court that the defendant's apartment in Pullman was searched, as well as his office. Spartan would be a kind characterization. There was virtually nothing there. Nothing of evidentiary value was found. And of course, we are now talking 6-8 weeks after the time of the killings. In Pennsylvania, the defendant's car was seized and it was actually pretty much disassembled internally. And it also had been cleaned. There was a bucket of cleaner right beside it. I think we can all look to our own cars, you know, in those compartments in the doors. You can try to keep them clean where you put stuff. There's always some degree of crud in there. They were spotless. The defendant's car had been meticulously cleaned inside. And the state would present to the jury that that was part of the defendant's plan in covering up this. The defendant has studied crime. In fact, he did a detailed paper on crime scene processing when he was working on his pre-doctorate degrees, and he had that knowledge and skill. So, Your Honor, at the end, the state submits that the evidence that I've given just a quick overview of, and that to present in court would consume weeks, which the state is prepared to do and has been prepared to do, would show that as the defendant has just admitted and pleaded guilty on November 13th, 2022, excuse me, Mr. Kohberger entered the residence of 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. He did that with the intent to kill. We will not represent that he intended to commit all of the murders that he did that night, but we know that that is what resulted, and that he then killed intentionally, willfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice forethought, Manny Mogan, Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, and Santa Kernodle. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, based on the state's proffer and importantly, based upon defendant's explicit admission to committing these crimes, the court finds there is a factual basis. Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. Kohberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogan, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Goncalves, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Right. The court will find that the defendant understands the nature of the charges and each offense and the possible consequences to him of his guilty plea. The court finds that there is a factual basis for the plea and that finds the defendant believes the plea to be in his best interest. I find that the plea was given freely, voluntarily, and was intelligently made. I accept the plea. I direct that it be entered. I'll continue the matter for sentencing in this case. I think it was mentioned on the call Monday afternoon, the defense wishes to waive a pretrial investigation. Is that accurate?
Yes, Your Honor.
The state also?
Yes, Your Honor, the state does not believe pre-sentence investigation is needed given the evidence that is available. We want to, though, make sure that all of the victims have the opportunity to make statements to the court at sentencing.
Absolutely. And certainly both the state and the defense may present whatever sentencing memorandum and other documents you wish me to consider. The victims will be given an opportunity to provide the statements that they wish to at sentencing. Do we need more than 1 full day for sentencing?
I do not believe so, Your Honor. We have numerous victims, and we have victims who share unique perspectives on this, and we want to make sure that they all have time to express their feelings to the court. But I believe that if we can start perhaps 8:30 or so in the morning, that we should be able to complete it all in 1 day.
Defense agree with that in terms of the time frame?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So as it happens, we have some time reserved in this case in July and August. the week of July 22nd is available. I don't know if that's too soon for the parties, or the next week, the week of August 4 is available. Any preference?
Your Honor, we're prepared as soon as the court wants to schedule it.
The state, I believe, would be prepared on the 22nd. We've told the victims' families that we're looking at approximately those dates.
All right. So because of the plan to bring in so many jurors to fill out questionnaires, I had ordered that no other trials could take place in this courthouse the week of July 22nd. And so we will use that in terms of the sentencing date because of what I'm sure will be the significant interest of the media and the public, and the logistics that will be required to make that happen. Without trials going, it'll be a lot easier to do that. So let's pick that week. Why don't we pick July 23rd with the idea that if for some reason we don't finish, we could continue into the 24th. We'll start at 9 in the morning. Does that give your team enough time, Sandra? 9 in the morning? All right. Any concerns with that date?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
No, sir.
All right. Any reason why I should not rescind the non-dissemination order at this time?
You're right. I think that given the history of this case, it would be best if that remained in place through sentencing. So we have time to make sure there's the ability to completely answer questions. That would be the state's preference and recommendation.
Would have no objection for the order to remain in place through
All right.
sentencing.
I will, at this point, the idea to keep it until sentencing, which time it would be withdrawn in order to give the parties the space and time to prepare to meet what I'm sure will be the deluge of media requests. That's at least my preliminary decision at this point. We can always revisit if it seems to be, for some reason, I should. That said, obviously, I don't think the defendant, a bond was ever set for the defendant. Were it would be revoked. The prior order allowing him to come in civilian clothes is revoked, given his plea and no longer the presumption of innocence. And in fact, now the actual conviction for the crimes. He will continue to be held at the jail pending sentencing. Is there anything else to say?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
I assume that the trial date will be vacated
trial
and those
is-
4 jurors will be released.
The trial will be vacated, and I'm sure that the jury commissioner will get word to those that receive their summons that they won't be required to attend. So
Thank you, Your Honor.
that said, again, if you would all please wait for the parties and the victims' families and others to leave the courtroom before you do, I would appreciate it. And with that, we're adjourned. All right, please.
That was perhaps one of the most historic plea hearings in the history of criminal justice, not just in Idaho, but in the United States of America and elsewhere. You could cut the tension with a knife, and we're going to break it all down for you. Very dramatic, I have to say that. Unbelievably dramatic. The most chilling exchange was simple and succinct. Judge Stephen Hippler asking Bryan Kohberger, "Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?" Yes. He showed almost no remorse. None, I would say, not almost, but no remorse. He's completely stoic. He's in a gray shirt and tie. He's got his hands on his thighs the whole time, sitting up incredibly straight. He admits to the murder of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Santa Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, and he admits to it with premeditation. And then probably the most emotional part was the district attorney himself, Bill Thompson, at the end, when he mentioned the names and that Bryan Kohberger killed these 4. He was talking about the sort of the methodical nature as he went through the different rooms, and he mentions the 4 names. His voice just started to crack and quiver, and you could tell he couldn't really go on. And it was right at the end of his sentence, the judge took over. Very dramatic. And that just goes to show you how personally, for all the heat he is taking, and as upset as some of these families are, Bill Thompson's heart is in the right place. Obviously, incredibly bothered by these hideous crimes. So we are joined again by Colin McAllen. He is the host of the Is This Legal podcast, measured and straightforward. Colin, just your overall thoughts now on what we just witnessed.
Man, that was really tough to watch. And I've watched many of these hearings over the years, but you could absolutely feel the entire weight of a community in that courtroom. First of all, I think it pretty much went like we had predicted that it would, in terms of what the purpose of the hearing was and what we were there to do, and more importantly, what we weren't there to do. The judge took 4 guilty pleas to first-degree murder from Mr. Kohberger. Mr. Kohberger acknowledged killing all 4 victims. He pled guilty to each offense and the added count of burglary. Just something picking up on what you said, the emotion of the prosecutor, the emotion of Bill Thompson that came out, that was very palpable. And like you said, there has been a lot of heat and a lot of flack directed his way in the last few days about how this whole thing has come down. There are obviously many people who don't believe that there should have been a plea offer at all, that Mr. Kohberger is somehow pulling one over on the state here, and that maybe the prosecution, even if you believe some of the people who have opinions on this, are cowards and didn't want to go forward on first-degree murder. Frankly, I think those notions were put to bed for me by watching this man go through the factual basis about what happened here. It was obvious that he has been living with this case as a prosecutor for a long time. He felt the weight of this case, so much so that he could barely get through the statement of factual basis. That statement of factual basis, by the way, just in case some of your viewers are wondering, so a defendant, when you enter a plea of guilty, the judge has to make sure that there's a factual basis for the plea to go forward. And that's something that can be waived by the parties. It's something where the defendant can just basically say, "Look, I'm waiving a factual basis. I'm acknowledging that I committed this crime, and I don't need the state to lay out their factual basis." In this case, that recitation of facts by the district attorney was the factual basis. It was a summary of the A to Z investigation of Bryan Kohberger and a summary of why the state has charged him and why he's pleading guilty to these counts of murder. It's essentially the information that the defendant is acknowledging exists. He's saying that's what happened. That's what I am agreeing that I did. I did those things, and that's why I'm guilty. So, it was the closest thing that we had to Mr. Kohberger actually coming out and saying what he did. But essentially, he was agreeing or stipulating to the factual basis offered by the prosecution.
That's a live shot of Steve Goncalves right now. He's got the hat with the cross on it. COE, I don't know if there's audio linked up with this. Yeah, there it is. Let's just watch this for a minute. The Goncalves family made a decision to not go into the courtroom. And as far as I know, they never entered. They're outside in protest. This may have been a little bit earlier. I'm not 100% sure. But let's watch this, and then we'll go back over what just transpired inside the courtroom. But you can see they're outside the Ada County Courthouse. Again, Steve Goncalves in the hat. As expected, just a ton of media. This is the sort of thing, this media attention is, I'm sure, what Bryan Kohberger gets off on. Tonight we have Catherine Ramsland and Dr. Ann Burgess on. We're going to ask about that because It could be one of the precipitating reasons for this crime in the first place, the attention that this guy wanted. You can see that obviously he has crossed the street. The Goncalves family, they've now crossed the street. And back to a shot of the outside of the courthouse. If we get COE, I'm gonna mute it, but let's if you have any pictures, local reports, anyone speaking, just bring that up and we'll take it live. But one of the more interesting things among many in this hearing, Colin, was the way Judge Hippler, who is obviously, he is no nonsense. He started this entire hearing off before we got into the actual mechanics of the plea hearing. He said people have been calling his office. He said it's extraordinarily disruptive. They wanted me to weigh in about this plea agreement. He said it was highly inappropriate. He's basically reprimanding and rebuking the public here. He said the court will never take into account public sentiment. He said, as a judge, I make decisions on where facts and the law lead me. And he goes, I've not listened to any of the messages. I'm going to stop it there. Were you surprised by this, Colin? And I guess in English, what is he saying? He's saying, look, I'm just the judge here. I don't have the ability to give my personal take on this and take a side. Is that essentially what he's saying?
Yeah, that is essentially what he's saying. And he had about 10 minutes or so worth of comments before we really got into the nitty-gritty of the hearing. And I actually thought the judge did a pretty good job of kind of setting the tone. He first started out addressing everybody in the courtroom, making sure that no matter what happens in that courtroom, that everybody respect the decorum. And the fact that this is a very important forum to conduct business and any outbursts wouldn't be tolerated. That's a good way to get control over your courtroom. I did think it was maybe unusual and interesting that the judge went out of his way to comment on the fact that he was not influenced by anybody, but that's exactly what we want. I mean, a judicial officer of any kind, what he's saying is, I make my decisions based on what's presented to me within these four walls of this courtroom. I'm not supposed to be biased by what pundits are saying or what public sentiment is. And of course, in a high-profile case, everybody has an opinion. Everybody's been paying attention to that, and so I think he's just going out of his way to say, "Hey, I'm not going to be swayed by that." And also, of course, he's wanted to protect his court staff and say, "Please stop bombarding our office with calls." I know that the Goncalves family in their Facebook post was urging members of the public who wanted the death penalty. This family was urging people to reach out to the court and communicate that. I don't know if that's exactly what the judge was referring to, but I know that there were some calls by one of the victims' families for the community to reach out to the judge and reach out to the court and let him know that this is not something that people are okay with. But I think the judge was just going out of his way to say, look, I'm basing my decision based on what the parties are doing, based on what I've been presented, and this is their call, not mine.
Yeah. These are live pictures from outside the courthouse. The COE is going to keep these up. You see that they've got microphones there. I'm not sure that anyone is going to speak, but we'll leave this up. And if anyone comes out, we're going to bring it to you live. So just to pick up on what Judge Hippler was saying, he was basically, again, reprimanding the public for this plea to change the plea, ironically, and to make him go to trial, essentially. He went on to say, Colin, that he forwarded the messages to the security inside the Ada County Courthouse. And he said, in some cases, to law enforcement. So it sounds like some of these were basically threats and not just suggestions. How seriously does the judge need to take this? Obviously, he's sending it to law enforcement.
Obviously, I think that tells you right there that he takes it seriously. I mean, if he's forwarding something to law enforcement, and that to me coincides with kind of how he handled the situation. I think you used the phrase "no nonsense." This is a judge who's not going to put up with anybody. This is a judge who's concerned about not only his safety, but the safety of court staff. People who are just going to work every day, trying to work for the county of Ada in Idaho, where this horrible crime just happened to fall at their doorstep. So I think this is a small office, and I think he's doing his best to protect people. And I think it also kind of underscores how seriously he's taken by letting the public know that he's willing to turn any types of threatening communications over to law enforcement. No judge, no prosecutor, frankly, no party to this case deserves to be threatened for doing their job. That's what these folks are doing. People have an opinion on it. People have an opinion on whether or not this was a good day in court or a bad day in court, and I get that, but you've got to keep it reasonable. It's okay to voice your opinion. It's not okay to make threats.
Yeah. Again, keeping a live look up here of outside the courthouse. You saw the still photographers lifting up those lenses as though someone was coming. Then they put them down. This is definitely a bit of a media frenzy. Karen collects with I like this comment, actually. Please don't say the family should accept this. Your beautiful daughter or son was not brutally murdered. Please show some empathy and compassion. There is no way that any of us, not a single one of us, can put ourselves in the shoes of those families, especially the parents. I have 3 kids. I can't sit here and tell you what Steve Goncalves should or shouldn't do, or the Kernodle family. God forbid this happened to any of us. We just have absolutely no way of knowing. So this is ultimately and you heard Judge Hippler say this, that it's ultimately the government and the prosecutor, the DA here, Bill Thompson, who has the buck stops with him, and this is the decision he made. And whether it was the right or wrong one, I guess, can be debated. But I agree, like, we shouldn't be commenting on behalf of the parents, because we have no idea what that is like. None of us should ever know what that is like. So Judge Hippler just put a bow on this part of it. Then we're going to get into the plea hearing. Okay, we're going to get that in 1 second, COE. He talked about separation of powers, and he said, this is where he said it, the elected prosecutor is the sole authority. He says, meaning the judge, I can only reject a plea only if the defendant doesn't meet the criteria. Then he apologized to the family for such short notice. He said, and I quote, I, like everyone else, learned of this plea agreement Monday afternoon. I had no inkling beforehand. Today is what? Wednesday? Is today what? Yeah, today is Wednesday. He just learned of this himself on Monday. He said that he was actually in the process of getting 10,000 Ada County citizens to come and fill out jury questionnaires as part of the jury selection process. But he said it was important to take to get this done, the work done for this plea deal on time. And then he warned everybody, hey, if you leave the courtroom during the hearing, you're not coming back, and you need to wait for the families to leave first. So any surprise there, Colin, that he said the judge himself just learned about this himself on Monday and was basically preparing to have an army of potential jurors come into the courthouse for the trial?
Yeah, I felt like he was maybe voicing a little bit of frustration. That I might be reading into it, but I think he was certainly trying to suggest, look, I didn't know about this. I didn't schedule this. Like everybody else, I found out about this relatively recently, and he also seemed to exhibit surprise. And I think that's the one thing that I have found a little baffling, really, since the media broke the story that Bryan Kohberger was going to enter a plea. I was amazed at how quickly this has happened. And again, I wonder, I can't help but wonder if maybe even the Goncalves family might have had a softer reaction to this whole thing if they had been given more notice, if they had been given more of an opportunity to have dialogue with the district attorney, knowing that they probably wouldn't have changed the DA's mind, but maybe just a little bit more time to understand what was happening. It seems like the rollout of this plea deal, for a lack of a better term, was just kind of horribly done. It seemed to come together very quickly for a case that had been pending for over 2.5 years and it seemed dead set for trial. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I was wondering why we ended up in court so quickly today. Even, I mean, the fact that I was wondering, gosh, why not give this a couple of more weeks, so, and let people kind of digest the information and be ready for it. Perhaps, though, what I've been thinking, Joel, maybe the judge is like, okay, this guy's saying he wants to plead guilty. Let's get this done. Let's make sure he doesn't change his mind. Let's make sure we lock this up before we start bringing in 10,000 Ada County jurors to court and wasting their time for a case that's not going to go forward. So, I mean, from that standpoint, I can understand why the judge would get it scheduled and get it done so that, you know, basically we have a resolution in the case and we can forego the need for a trial. But boy, yeah, it does seem really rushed for the magnitude of this case.
Yeah, great minds think alike, because Melinda says, do you think that they were afraid that he would change his mind about taking the plea, so they went really fast with it? That's a great point, and that might have been some of the calculus involved in why this happened so unbelievably quickly. We do have a soundbite here from Steve Goncalves ahead of this was before the hearing. I'm going to try to play it right now. Here we go.
Do you have any message for Kohberger's family?
Yeah, what do you want?
We know when you flew out here. We know. We have your flight records.
How are you preparing to see him today?
I'm not going to see him.
When you say you know the flight records, what do you mean, Steve?
I know when his parents booked their flight. When his father did.
What does that mean?
You'll find out.
Would you like to say something to them?
No, I don't care about it.
The rest of your family went inside. Is it important for them to be in there today?
Yeah, for sure.
Where are you going? Are you not able to get?
Getting out of this zoo.
You're not staying in?
No, I'm not going in.
I'm going to play that one more time. So he's talking about the Kohbergers, and he's insinuating in this. I've never heard this before, by the way, that they may have been, they've known. The insinuation here is that people knew about this longer than the Goncalves family has known about it, because he's talking about he knows when they purchased their plane ticket to come out. The Kohbergers were in court today, the family. Now, he says the rest of his family went inside the courtroom, but he did not want to go in, and they asked, what are you going to do? He said, get out of or away from this zoo. Let me play it again with the context.
Do you have any message for Kohberger's family?
Yeah, what do you want?
We know when you flew out here. We know. We have your flight records.
How are you preparing to see him today?
I'm not going to see him.
When you say you know the flight records, what do you mean, Steve?
I know when his parents booked their flight. When his father did.
What does that mean?
You'll find out.
Would you like to say something to them?
No, I don't care about it.
The rest of your family went inside. Is it important for them to be in there today?
Yeah, for sure.
Where are you going? Are you not able to get?
Getting out of this zoo.
You're not staying in?
No, I'm not going in.
He said he's not going in. Just a reminder, tonight, 7 o'clock, there's so much news. But tonight, a really special STS show. We've got Dr. Ann Burgess, who's a living legend. Basically, she started the criminal profiling unit for the FBI. She's close to 90, if not 90, and still sharp as anything. And she's going to be joined by Bryan Kohberger's former professor at DeSales, professor of criminology, who's famous in her own right, Dr. Catherine Ramsland, who hasn't really talked about this. She did an interview with News Nation last night, a short interview. This is going to be, much lengthier, and we're going to take questions. I think the COE put a post together, a poll where you are not a poll, but a post where you can submit questions tonight for the show. So that's going to be at 7 o'clock Eastern. And then obviously I've been mired in this, but I'm hearing something about Sean Diddy Combs, the bail hearing being at 5 p.m. So we're going to find out. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, But if that is true, we'll come back with Sean Diddy Combs and what's going on with him. Does he stay in at the detention center at the MDC? Is he released? If you didn't see that, he was acquitted on the two most serious charges, convicted on the lesser charges. So there's a lot of debate over that as well. So a lot going on. Back to this. So just going through the particulars of this plea hearing, the judge simply and matter-of-factly starts it by saying, we're here for this plea hearing. Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty? He says yes. That came a little later on. But again, Bryan Kohberger was in a shirt and tie today. Some people thought he would be in jail clothing. He will be in that, I believe, for the sentencing. He'll be in a jail jumpsuit. Some people were speculating because of sort of the way the shirt was fitting him that maybe he was in a bulletproof vest, and I would not be surprised to find that out. The judge then turns to his attorney, the public defender, Ann Taylor. Ms. Taylor, have you had sufficient time to discuss this with your client? Yes. Did you have sufficient time for discovery? Yes. Were any counter offers suggested? Do you guys consent to this? All yeses. And then he has Bryan Kohberger stand up and take an oath to swear that he is telling the truth. And then the judge, being the civilized and respectful society that we are, this would not happen in other countries. He says, very respectfully, to a killer of 4 people, no longer alleged. This guy is now I guess he's not technically. Is he technically convicted now, Colin? You have to wait for sentencing.
He's technically convicted.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that I guess I don't want to go out too far. I heard the judge say that the conviction enters today. I think he said that when he was actually referring to his jail outfit and saying that he's going to be brought in, regular jail clothes at the next court hearing. I will tell you, that can vary state to state. In my home state, Colorado, there's the guilty plea, and then we have a sentencing on a later date, and the conviction doesn't enter until sentencing. So that's my hesitation. But I think that I have a feeling that the conviction is entered, and they're simply just going to be imposing the sentence in the case at the sentencing hearing.
Yeah, here's John Day. John is a criminal defense attorney out of Santa Fe, a former investigative reporter, a Harvard grad, I found out today. And Colin McCallan is a defense attorney out of Denver and the host of Is This Legal podcast. John, I don't know if you got to see it all, but there was an emotional moment during this, and it was not from Bryan Kohberger, but it was actually from the DA, Bill Thompson, who had trouble getting out the names of the victims toward the end when he had to state that the 4 of them were murdered. What is that? I mean, people are really upset with Bill Thompson because he agreed to this plea deal. The families are split in 2. The public is split in 2. But what does that tell you about, I guess, where his heart is at?
I don't know what his motivation was. I mean, I'm a former prosecutor. I've had to have cases, I had to present cases where the victims' families were not necessarily in agreement with me, but I spent a lot of time working with them. I mean, I knew what their reaction was going to be, but they at least had the benefit of someone sitting down with them for days and days, explaining why I was doing what I was doing. In this case, the fact that you have this reaction from these families, the anger, the level of anger and the feeling of betrayal means that this DA's office said, you know what, we're going to do this. We're going to let the chips fall where they may. And it's not a good practice. I don't think it's good practice. I don't think that the family should have been blindsided like that, if that's in fact what happened. Of course, at the end of the day, the prosecutor makes the call. He's not representing the victims. He's representing the community, et cetera, et cetera. But, it's such an emotional thing. And to have a family feel like they were blindsided means that the DA made a conscious decision. We're going to go ahead and do it this way. And I'm going to, take the heat afterward, but it's not a good practice.
Yeah. So Colin, back to that. We just listened to a soundbite from Steve. Oh, Colin has to go, but let me ask you this real quick, Colin, if you have 1 minute.
I do.
Yeah. So we just listened, John, so you know what's going on, to a soundbite from Steve Goncalves, the victim's father, one of the victim's fathers. And he is very upset. And he was insinuating that the Kohbergers got word of this well before the victims' families, because he says, I have information on when they got their flight to come out here. But I mean, Colin, the judge himself said he only found out about this Monday. So I don't know what to make of that. What do we make of that? I mean, if it happened before Monday, then what's happening here?
That's a great question, and I don't know if it's one I can answer. I mean, there could be a number of reasons why. I mean, let's say he was talking about the Kohberger family, and they were maybe it appeared that they were flying out or had notice of this hearing prior to the Goncalves family. Well, we don't necessarily know that that's why the Kohberger family was flying out. Honestly, maybe they were flying out in order to meet with Bryan to help him make this decision. That's very possible. I mean, I can see if you're a defendant weighing an important decision like this, I could see that it's possible. Maybe you want to consult with your family. Maybe that was their intention to get out there a little bit early because they felt like there was momentum toward a plea deal. And I mean, again, this is their son. Presumably, they do not want him executed. Maybe they saw an opportunity to get out and make their opinion on this matter heard, if it was one that was going to be heard in the first place, which probably not. But so, I don't know. I mean, look, poor Steve Goncalves. I think it's safe to say what an emotional day. He's surrounded by reporters sticking cameras and microphones in his face, trying to get a sound bite. And of course he's made comments to the media before, so he's in this position. But here he is outside of a courthouse while his daughter's killer is getting sentenced to murder. I'm going to respectfully just give him the benefit of the doubt and say it's probably not his best moment. It's probably not, the emotions are all over the place. And I think he's probably, like I think he said at the end, I'm just trying to get out of this zoo. That's what I'd want to do if I were him.
100%.
Very sad.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you could, and just imagine you go through the trial, it would just be compounded day in and day out, but that's what he wants. Colin McCown is the host of Is This Legal podcast. He is also a criminal defense attorney out of Denver. Colin, now I owe you a McCallan, which is what your name sounds like, because you've been on the last few days, and love having you here, and we'll get you back on probably way before you want to be back, but we'll get you back.
No problem. I appreciate the opportunity to engage with your listeners, and really enjoyed your podcast. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. John, just a few more minutes and then we're going to wrap this, but the COE pulled a soundbite here. This is from the hearing, and I believe it is where Bryan Kohberger is admitting to his guilt. Let's watch it together and then we'll get your reaction.
All right. Based on the state's proffer, and importantly, based upon defendant's explicit admission to committing these crimes, the court finds there is a factual basis. Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. Kohberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogan, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Goncalves, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first-degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
And he goes through the other names. John, what runs through your mind when you listen to that other than it's chilling? Oh, gotta unmute you there, John. I'm sorry. I got you. Go ahead.
Joel, your blood runs cold when you watch that. I mean, the victims, the families, it's a matter of fact plea. I've been on both sides of these. It's a keystone moment. But if you're the families, again, it highlights that he's going to continue to, be able to interact with the world. They've lost their loved ones. They'll never get to do that again. And you understand the rage behind the families who are not in agreement with this plea. And, there's the element of, well, if by skipping a trial, we don't know why he did what he did, taking this plea, he doesn't have to enunciate any reasons, well, that wouldn't happen in a trial if he doesn't testify. So I don't think that's necessarily a benefit, but you also have the concept of what was it about this case that the prosecutor had concerns about? What is it about the evidence that he thought was going to be problematic with the jury in this case? What was it that he thought might not lead to a conviction? We don't know that. We may never know that, but the family certainly, it's not an agreement. Half the families are in agreement apparently, and I guess half not. But, of course, there is the concept of, well, you're sparing the families. But if you're a family who wants to see a trial, your feelings are not foremost in your mind. So I have a lot of sympathy for those families, but having been in the prosecutor's shoes, I understand why you make a deal like that. But in this particular case, there's so many unanswered questions.
Yeah, 100%. What about this? From Jay, all they had to do is provide a victim advocate. They never treated the families right. What is the protocol for this? I mean, how do we not know that they didn't have a victim's advocate?
Well, most DA's offices have people who are working as victim advocates. Sometimes they're actually really doing a good job. Sometimes they're just there to CYA the attorneys, and give them some cover with difficult cases. That just depends on the office and depends on the prosecutors. We don't know the level of interaction between the DA's office and the victim's family. If you're a DA and you've got this plan in place, and if you give the families heads up too far in advance, and they're not going to join in you, and they're not going to be in agreement, the danger is, if you're the elected DA, that someone's going to go public with it and announce their understanding of a plea before you do. So, this is such the actual turmoil, the dissension, the anger, the outrage of the families who are not in agreement. It really resonates with victims of crimes and their families around the country, because I think, every DA has an experience of having an angry victim's family. But in this particular case with, the 4 dead young people, and the idea that somehow we're not going to have a trial that brings us the closure that a trial would bring, that can be a hard pill to swallow. Some families are in agreement, and it's a very personal decision. It's, do we want to go through that? Do we feel like justice is served? This man will never see the light of day. A life in prison is not necessarily a picnic. But again, the concept of the victims' families will never see their kids again. This guy gets to interact with the world, even if it's a very small 10 by 12 cell.
Yeah. Kevin Fixler, our friend at the Idaho Statesman, Judge Hippler agrees to maintain the gag order until after Bryan Kohberger's sentencing, which, by the way, is July 23rd. I'm planning to go out for that, by the way, sentencing on July 23rd. But after that, he plans to rescind it. That's the gag order. I guess the bottom line question here, John, is what can we expect after sentencing in terms of any kind of transparency, any kind of discovery? Brian Thompson ran through some things, but not a whole lot. So the DA, Bill, I'm sorry, Brian is a reporter in New York. I just caught myself, but Bill Thompson. So what can we expect after the sentencing in terms of transparency or discovery to be produced for the public?
Boy, I wouldn't expect much at this point. It's not in the prosecutor's, lack of a better word, selfish interest to do anything other than leave this as it is. The more information that comes out, if there's information that indicates that this was a good idea, that supports that he had some problems, that would be interesting. I don't know that we'll see that. But again, I keep getting back to what is in this prosecutor's mind, where he says, this is the biggest, most important case in my career, the most important case in this community. And I'm taking a step that's going to draw the ire of a lot of people. And what is the reasoning behind that? I don't know, we'll necessarily see discovery or more factual information, but I would like to know what is in the mind of a prosecutor who makes that decision. I think that's something that's certainly open to public discussion and ought to be open to public discussion, because there's so many people who disagree with that. If you're an elected official, why not just say, here's why I did what I did. I know a lot of you don't like it, but you elected me to this job, and I'm going to have to take the heat. I'd like to know what went into the decision.
Yeah. One of the things that's notable, this is not a John Day question, but it is going to be for Dr. Ann Burgess and Catherine Ramsland, his former professor, coming on STS at 7 o'clock tonight. I mean, he had this sort of brand new haircut, and he's in his very nice fitting shirt and tie. It was almost like, you know, it was yearbook day at school. This guy came prepared, looking good. He obviously, this was in his mind probably the biggest day of his, you know, of his life, but not the way it is for everybody else. So this is a sick, unhealthy mind, in my opinion, sort of exactly where he belongs. But John, sort of in that same vein, he was so matter of fact about this. It'd be like, you know, me coming home from school and my mom asking me how my day was. It was great, Mom. That's how he was answering these questions. There was nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing behind those answers.
Yeah, again, that's something for the, you know, the medical professionals that, you know, what is behind the mind of someone who can plead guilty to murdering literally in cold blood in a horrific way 4 young innocent people. And this guy has escaped the ultimate punishment. So for him, it's like, look, I got a great deal. I know what my future is going to be, but at least I'm going to be around for it. The idea of what's behind the mind of a sociopath, the psychopath, the killer's mind, of course, is something that fascinates everybody in a really, you know, tragic and dark way. But the medical professionals are going to be the ones who can explain what goes on in the mind of someone who takes an action like that. This is just, the court system handles it on one level, but the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the people who study this, boy, they're going to have a lot to explain to the public.
Yeah, I think we have another sound bite. I'm going to roll the dice here and think that I'm playing the right one, and hopefully I am. And COE, we're going to need these tonight for Dr. Ramsland and Dr. Burgess. But, oh, where did it go? Just disappeared. COE, do you want, here it is. Is this it? Can you play it, COE, so we get the right one?
Show that as the defendant has just admitted and pleaded guilty on November 13th, 2022, excuse me, Mr. Kohberger entered the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. He did that with the intent to kill. We will not represent that he intended to commit all of the murders that he did that night, but we know that that is what resulted, and that he then killed intentionally, willfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice forethought, Manny Mogan, Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, and Santa Kernodle. Thank you.
John, your reaction to hearing that? I mean, lawyers are people too.
Yeah, and of course, if you're the prosecutor who's been in charge of this case, it's human to have that sort of emotion. He also knows that he's under fire from families that don't agree with what he did and are angry at him. You know, you've got to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's acting what he thinks the best interests of the community are. But if he didn't show some emotion, I'd be a little concerned, because that would indicate that he doesn't have the human stake in this thing that he ought to have as a prosecutor. But again, it gets down to the issue of, we won't know under this deal why. And the why is, it wouldn't necessarily be answered in a trial with a conviction or an acquittal, but you've got to wonder what was going on, and was there some explanation in the mind of the sick, you know, twisted, dark killer that would somehow bring some solace to the families, to at least understand, bring some kind of closure as to why this, you know, the guy killed their loved ones. And with this plea, we're not going to know.
Yeah. I will not be, I'm not pushing for it. I wouldn't be fazed by it. I wouldn't lose a lot of sleep. I have a feeling this guy's getting prison justice, because this story's too big. I don't wish death on anyone, but that is potentially in his future. These are the 4 victims. You got Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, who's a triplet, and you got Xana Kernodle. Wish the judge could have gotten Kernodle's last name right. He butchered it every time, but judges are people too. So there you go. You know, just in terms of sort of the practical elements of this plea agreement, Judge Hippler said, do you agree with the plea agreement? Yes. Do you understand the charges? Yes. Pleas for the max on each sentence. Do you understand that? Yes. Anyone threaten you to plead guilty? No. Has anyone promised you anything? No. Anyone told you to be untruthful? No. Anyone offer you a reward of some sort for this? No. Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty? Yes. That's, to me, the most powerful. These are all run-of-the-mill questions for a very not run-of-the-mill case, right, John?
Yeah, it's the standard guilty plea proceeding that the judge has to go through with the defendant who's pleading guilty, so the judge can be reassured in his mind that that the defendant's doing this voluntarily and knowingly. You know, the judge didn't have to take this plea. I mean, that's another issue. I think the judges have the discretion to say, I'm not going to accept that. So you have a judge agreeing with his local DA that this is in the best interest of justice, and that's their position. I'm sure the judge and the DA were certainly well aware of the opposition of some of the families and also the support of some of the families. And that in itself is sort of a tragic element of this. You've got the families of the victims who are not necessarily on the same page. They can each have their own personal reasons for choosing to do what they do, but you've got to understand that a family that's so angry about the deal has to be, they've got to be listened to. They want to be listened to. And it certainly sounds like they were not listened to the extent that they wanted to be prior to the plea.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to plan to go out to the sentencing. I had my tickets for the trial, so I'm going to use those tickets and head out there for the sentencing, which is going to be tough. But I would like to be there, and we'll bring that to you live when it happens on July 23rd. Bill Davis, couple more questions and final thoughts, and then we'll wrap this up. I think we're coming back. I have to check with the COE. I think 5 o'clock is Diddy's bail hearing. And then at 7, we've got Dr. Catherine Ramsland, who is Bryan Kohberger's former professor and an expert in serial killers, which is kind of odd. And she's being joined by Dr. Ann Burgess. So I'm not odd, but, you know, obviously in this case, that's what she was teaching him is odd or strange or whatever word you want to use. But Bill Davis, to John Day, why isn't allocution a condition of a plea agreement like this one?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it could have been a special condition that they bargained for, that they negotiated for. It's not usually in an agreement. It would be unusual for that to happen, but I've seen it. Again, it's another question for the DA. What was the negotiation like? Did you ask for something like that? Did you feel like you were being outmaneuvered by the defense? Did you feel like you had some leverage? I mean, I think it's a really good question, and the only one who can answer that really is going to be the elected official in the DA's office.
Yeah. Just one little part of the hearing I want to get through right now. Bill Thompson, of course, he goes through some of the evidence. He talks about the K-bar knife sheath, talks about how Bryan enters through the sliding door on the second floor. He goes to the, or on the third floor, I think, or second floor, I'm not sure, but he goes to the third floor. That's where he kills Maddie Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves. He talks about how the sheath was left next to Maddie Mogen's body and that there is single source male DNA on that sheath. Kaylee and Madison's blood DNA was on there also. He talks about how Xana was awake, but she was eventually killed too. That Ethan, he was asleep. So who knows if he even knows what happened to him. Horrific. He made it a point to say that there was no sexual component for the record. He also talked about the 2 surviving roommates. He said that they were asleep when all this happened. And then he goes into all the cell phone tracking. He talks about how Bryan ends up back at his apartment in Pullman, Washington, and talks about that selfie photo. The shirt, by the way, that he is wearing looks eerily similar to the shirt he's wearing in that selfie photo. If, in fact, it's the same shirt, that would be, I don't know, disturbing, to say the least. He talks about how his cell phone went to the Lewiston-Clarkston Valley, where the Snake River, and I believe it's the Clarkston River, if I got that right, where they join. The weapon was never found, John. A lot of people think it's at the bottom of the Snake River. He talks about how he also, when he got back later in time, started searching for a new K-bar knife. He tried to alter his transactions on Amazon. He went to the DMV to try to get Washington registration, that PA did not require front plates, that he finished his studies, that he went back home, and ultimately the arrest. Why is it necessary, I guess, to go through bits and pieces of the evidence, and how much more evidence does this government have besides what he laid out today?
Right. Well, to answer that, so the prosecutor doesn't necessarily have to lay out his entire case. He has to establish sufficient facts in the minds of a judge, so the judge will say, okay, I'll accept this plea. You've established a sufficient basis, a sufficient factual basis. The DA knows he's being watched. He knows he's being watched on a case where he's going to get a lot of criticism, and he's laying out what he's got against Kohberger. The only thing that's missing is the actual trial where he would have laid that out. So he is trying to bolster his decision. He's trying to say, this is why we would have certainly gotten a conviction if we had gone to trial. The only thing that's missing is the actual trial.
Yeah. So that's pretty much how it went. But Bill Thompson also talked about the car. He said, look, every single car has like a little bit of crud. He said he's never seen a car this meticulous, which obviously leads you to believe that, he cleaned it top to bottom to get rid of evidence. The judge asked, do we need, first of all, he asked, do you want to waive the pretrial investigation, which is that's basically a moot point. So everyone says yes. The judge never formally said this. So Bill Thompson on point said, is the trial going to be vacated now? And the judge said, yes, I'm going to vacate the trial, but he wanted that on the record. So there's no, loophole there. But sentencing is going to be July 23rd at 9 a.m. And the judge said, do we need more than one day? John, have you ever been part of a multi-day sentencing? It sounds like they might not be able to get it all in. He promised that they would go into the 24th if they can't finish it in one day. Do you recall a multi-day sentencing?
Yeah, I've done several. And I think what we can anticipate and what's going to be heartrending in this case is going to be the victim statements. And we know, we have some sense of at least the level of resentment and anger and disappointment that some of the families are going to have. But this is an opportunity for everybody to look Kohberger in the eyes if they want and say what they want to say. And it's going to be, I could see why they need a multi-day hearing, because this is the last chance. The victims don't get the trial to go through, to experience. This is their opportunity to say what they want to say goodbye to their loved ones, and look at Kohberger directly and tell them what they want to say. So it's going to be emotional. It's going to be tough. But the hope is that it's somehow cathartic to the families that had to go through this.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm looking at something here. I scroll Twitter where the news seems to break first, even though it's a cesspool. So that's really it. There's not much else. Steve Goncalves is the only family member that we know of who refused to go in. It's unclear. I don't know. You guys might know whether the Kernodles, they were a little upset about this if they showed up today. The Chapins were said to be there. The Mogan family was said to be there. We know that Bryan Kohberger's own family was there. I'm curious to hear more about this flight, this ticket that Steve Goncalves said that the Kohbergers had purchased sooner than everyone else, and that the implication is that they had insight into this plea even before the victims' families. So we'll see about that and what happens. Anna Lissette here says the Snake River is in my backyard in southwestern Idaho. It's big and dangerous here, a lot bigger and more dangerous at Clarkston. Maybe that's where he tossed the knife, because it sounds like that's where he was. The best thing I can do, I think we can all do, is after this sentencing is cut off all the oxygen to Bryan Kohberger and not talk about him, and let him sit in prison where he's going to stay the rest of his life, and most likely the next couple, maybe decades, in solitary, because he is going to be a target in that prison. John Day, you get the last word.
I just keep thinking about the families and what they heard today and what they're going to have to prep for this sentencing. What are the services that the DA's provided to them? What's the community response been? We know it's obviously been heartfelt, but you got to keep thinking about these families and the idea of whether or not this actually brings the closure that they need. And that's such a personal decision. But I just think the fact that some of them are so angry has got to resonate with us.
100%. John Day's got great insight. He was on earlier. I can't even keep track of the number of shows we're doing today. I believe we're coming back at 5 Eastern for the Diddy bail hearing, and then a really special show tonight. You literally have the living legend, Dr. Ann Burgess, and Bryan Kohberger's professor from DeSales University, who happens to study serial killers, and that is Dr. Catherine Ramsland. So please join us. You can follow me for the latest to see if we're doing the 5. As the COE said to me, just be anchor man. I'll take care of all the work. So kudos to the COE for handling all that. Space Coast on the West Coast. Can't do it without him. Steve Cohen came up huge as always today with amazing guests, including a witness in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, who is the Punisher, Sheree Hayes. So we appreciated him being on. But check me out on Instagram, Surviving the Survivor, or Twitter or X at Podcast STS, and I'll let you know about the 5 p.m. But we're definitely back at 7. And John, we'll see you soon. Thank you all for being here. I got to get to the right page before I say goodbye. There we are. Love you, America. Love you, Santa Fe. Love you, Boise, Idaho. And these are the people that we need to think about tonight right there. You've got Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, Xana. This day should be all about them, as will the sentencing day, where the families are going to get to speak. Love you all. See you later in the afternoon. John, thank you.
Thank you.